Good afternoon. Welcome to the EV update today. I'm Sue Couch. I am a member of the Science, Medical, and Technology Committee, and I'm really excited to have Gary Morris once again do his annual EV update. He's been doing them for a couple of years now. The list of EVs are growing, as you'll see in the presentation, and so he's got lots of great information for you. Before we get started, I just want to mention that in addition to this class, we're following it up with a class on EV charging, which is next Tuesday. So if you haven't signed up for that, you can still do that. That will teach you what it's like to live with an EV once you decide to make that purchase. And then a week from today, Gary's going to be hosting a showcase of EV vehicles sponsored by people who own an EV vehicle, and some of the dealers will have them there. So it'll be an opportunity for you to actually go look at all those vehicles. So make sure you sign up for it. It's like a 3-part series. The EV charging is Tuesday, November 15th at 1 p.m. And the showcase is Thursday, November 17th. And that's at an off-site location. Gary probably can tell you exactly where it is, but it's on one of the Hope parking lots here.
Did you want me to fill that information in now, Sue?
Yeah, let me, go ahead and say right now, Gary, and then I'll introduce you formally.
The showcase will be a week from today, from 1 to 2:30, and it will be in visitor lot 62. That's the parking lot for DeVos Fieldhouse that is closest to the corner of 11th and Lincoln. You enter it off 11th Street. And we're not going to be checking tickets. So, anybody that wants to can show up. If you don't get a chance to sign up, then we'll never know. We'd be glad to have any and all come and kick the tires on electric vehicles.
It was quite successful last year. Quite a few people showed up, and it was a really good opportunity to get a hands-on look and touch of these vehicles and what it's like to be in one. Okay, I'll go ahead and introduce Gary. He probably doesn't need any introduction. He's been a presenter for Haas for a number of years. Always does a great job, but a little bit on his background. He has a bachelor's in economics, a master's in artificial intelligence, and a PhD in machine learning. For the last 10 years of his federal career, he was the chief of the IRS Artificial Intelligence Lab. He has driven a hybrid, a plug-in hybrid, and battery electric car. So all versions of how we've evolved to this point. So I'm going to turn it over to Gary. He's going to do this via Zoom today.
Thank you, Sue. I think I have to correct one thing she said. I have owned a hybrid and currently drive a plug-in hybrid. And just today, Ford is manufacturing our new Mustang Mach-E. So soon it will be true that I've driven all three. Here's an overview of what we're going to be talking about today. First, we'll quickly take a look at the global picture for EVs. Then we'll focus in on the national picture. And after talking about how things are going with promoting EVs, we'll talk about a very important topic, namely battery designs and chemistries that are still in the labs, but pretty much coming our way. Then finally, we'll get to the meat of the presentation, which is a survey of available electrified vehicles. At the very end, I'm going to delve into all the details of the rules for tax credits, and they are complicated, but we'll allude to them during the presentation, but we'll go over all the details at the end. If the timing works out correctly, we would have approximately 15 minutes at the end of this presentation to do question and answer in general. But my feeling is that questions are best when they're fresh. So if you have a question, I believe that Dave has a roving mic there in the classroom, or Sue does. Just raise your hand. They can let me know that we have a question. They'll bring you the microphone so that everyone can hear the question, including fellow Zoomers. And then we'll discuss your question in real time. Okay? I think the best way to describe what's going on with EV these days was penned by Charles Dickens. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It certainly is the best of times in many ways. There have been increased sales and industry commitments around the world. Both California and New York, as you probably know, have decided to ban all non-zero emission vehicle sales by 2035. And in California, at least, there's going to be a step up to that where manufacturers will be required to sell higher and higher percentages of zero emission vehicles. And there are a lot of other states, I believe about a dozen, that follow at least some aspects of California's zero emission policy. So by 2035, the US auto industry is on notice that a large part of their market's going to go away if they're not prepared to sell electric vehicles. Now, China, which is the world's largest car market, has also announced that they are going to ban the sales of non-electrics. They have not yet set the date, but you should note that in almost all of their emissions controls policies, they mimic California. I'm betting on 2035. Other nations have joined the bandwagon. Interestingly, Norway, which has the highest percentage of electric vehicles of any country in the world, has said they're going to ban non-electrics as of 2025. How can they do that? Well, they don't have a domestic auto industry that's lobbying them to delay the deadline. So they're going to lay the hammer down just 3 years from now. By 2030, you can see there's a significant batch of countries that are going to ban non-electrics. By 2035, the United Kingdom will be banning even hybrid vehicles and plug-ins. It will be all battery electrics in the United Kingdom starting in 35. And here in North America, Quebec is going to ban pure gas and diesel vehicles as of 2035. France and Singapore and Sri Lanka are going to join the party eventually. And Costa Rica apparently didn't want to rush things, but by 2050, even they are going to be banning internal combustion engines. Now, of all people, Bentley is leading the charge among manufacturers. They've said that all of their cars will have a plug by 2026, and all of them will be battery electrics by 2030. That's the most aggressive schedule that anyone has published. Of course, if you can afford a Bentley, I guess you can afford to do that kind of thing. General Motors, certainly the big frog in our pond, has said that all of their vehicles will be electric by that magic date of 2035. Ford has said they're going to be all electric by 2035. And furthermore, they have committed that within 2 years, they're going to have 9 electrified vehicles on sale. Honda has said that 40% of their US sales will be electric by 2030 and 80% by 2035. They're not willing to completely close off sales of internal combustion, but they're pretty much getting on the bandwagon. Toyota, the world's second leading manufacturer, has said that they're going to have 15 battery electrics on sale within 3 years. And they're pledging that by 2050, their entire corporation will be carbon neutral. The VW Group, which is the world's largest manufacturer, has said that they will have 50% of all their cars battery electrics in just 8 years. VW Group, as you know, includes Audi, Porsche, and a number of others in addition to Volkswagen. Stellantis, the international corp that owns Chrysler and Jeep, has said that they will have at least one battery electric by 2025, and they expect to have, quote, a full EV portfolio by 2028. I'm sure that does not mean that all their vehicles will be electric, but they at least intend to have one entry at least in every segment by 28. Hyundai Kia has said that by 2035, they're going to have only electric cars in Europe. They have not yet made that commitment for the United States, but they have said that globally, all their cars will be electric by 2040. Jaguar Land Rover has said all electric by 2030. And Mercedes-Benz have said that internal combustion vehicles will be close to zero by 2030. So whether you're looking at countries or whether you're looking at companies, clearly the march toward electrified vehicles is really gathering steam. If you want to look at things graphically, this is a graph of plug-in hybrid and all-electric sales from 2011 through last year. And as you can see, the green, which is plug-in hybrids, was really half or more of all the electrified sales until about 5 years ago. But starting in 2019 especially, battery electrics are outpacing plug-ins. And as of 21, it was pretty substantial. And in 22, I believe that trend is even accelerated. Here's another way of looking at it. In California, which is by far the headquarters for electric vehicles in this country, last year, from January through September the 1st, in California, they sold 121,000 electric vehicles. That was almost 40% of all the electrics sold in the US. But from September 1st of last year to September 1st of this year, they sold more than double that, almost 290,000 electrics. Year to date in 22 in California, 1 out of every 6 vehicles is either a hybrid or has a plug. If you look at the third column for US EV sales, you'll see that through September 1st of last year, they had sold 310,000. In the 12 months since then, they have sold 642,000 nationwide. And that means that just a little under 6% of all US sales have been EVs. That is quite a jump from what it was just a couple of years ago. And cumulatively, you'll notice that as of September 1st of this year, there have been just under 3 million electrified vehicle sales in the US.
Hey, Gary, we have a question for you already online, if that's okay.
That's fine. Go ahead.
Great. So John asked, while driving my Tesla, I get into an accident. How do I get it repaired?
That's a question I'm going to defer to Dave, who drives a Tesla.
You go into your Tesla app, and there is a section for road service, and you select road service, and you will be chatting with somebody at some location, and you can coordinate a tow truck and so forth. They'll quiz you on what the problem is and so forth, and so you interact with them that way.
Thank you, Dave.
And
Any
also,
other questions in the classroom?
That's how I do it.
Any other questions? Okay. Well, continuing the best of times, in the US, for several years, the real issue was, can we convince people that they should consider buying an EV? Those days are gone, folks. There are more people trying to buy electric vehicles than the manufacturers can possibly handle. They can't build them fast enough. Not even Tesla, that has 2 gigafactories going full bore. And that kind of leads to the worst of times, because that means that there are now wait times if you want an electric vehicle in the US. If you want a Tesla, it's going to be anywhere from 2 to 6 months, depending on the model. In my experience, waiting for a Mustang Mach-E, there's a 2 to 3 month delay, depending on which version you're going after. If you want a Kia EV6, which is a pretty popular car, it's going to be more than 6 months between the time that you place an order and the time that you'll even find out if the factory has decided they're about to manufacture your car, let alone deliver it. On the other hand, if you're willing to buy a Chevy Bolt or the EUV, those waits are only 2 to 5 months. Jaguars are a little bit shorter, but at that price they should be. But speaking of price, if you can spring for a Porsche Taycan, you better be patient. It's going to be more than a year and could even be 2. Now, much of the news for EVs this year happened on August the 16th, when President Biden signed the Inflation Reduction Act of 22. Now, that act for the long haul is mostly good news. I'm going to give you a quick recap of it now. At the end, we'll go into all the details. But The good news is that for the rest of this year, the old rules are still in effect, except, excuse me, only cars that are assembled in North America, that is Canada, the US, or Mexico, only North American cars are still eligible for the credit. So if you were buying a Hyundai or a Volkswagen made in Europe or any of the other cars, you lost that credit as of August the 16th, unless you had a firm purchase order dated before then. Now, if you buy and title an electric vehicle by December 31st of this year, the full $7,500 federal credit will apply if it's a North American assembled car. This is the last year in which that $7,500 credit is an all or nothing thing. But if you are successful, as I hope to be, in buying and titling an electric vehicle by December 31st, tax planning is required. Now, as of January 1st, the $200,000 vehicle cap has been eliminated. You know, several years ago, both Tesla and General Motors lost their federal tax credits because they had sold more than 200,000 vehicles. As of January 1st, that cap is lifted. And for 10 years, there is no cap on the number of cars that can be sold. And as I say, this is a 10-year bill, so the credit is available through 2032. Furthermore, for the first time, there's a federal tax credit available for used electric vehicles, up to $4,000 if sold by a dealer. We'll talk more about it at the end. Now, as I said, only cars that are assembled in North America are qualified as of August 16th. Now, Volkswagen has a plant in Tennessee, so do General Motors and Honda. Mustang has a plant in Mexico. Chrysler has a plant making Pacificas in Canada. One of the things that was emailed to you before this class is a list from the government of all the vehicles that are recognized as being North American assembled. However, there are some manufacturers that are making cars in more than one location. The vehicle identification number shows the assembly location. And there is on the, I think it's on the IRS site, but there's a government site that has a VIN decoder. So you can know in advance from the vehicle ID number whether that particular car was assembled in North America or not. If you apply for the credit for an EV, on the form that you have to fill out with the IRS to get the credit, you have to provide the vehicle ID number. So you will only get the credit if, in fact, it was North American assembled. Now, for tax year 23, as well as for this year, it's still a non-refundable credit, which means tax planning is still required. Now, beginning in 24, the credit can be transferred to the dealer. That's what they're calling cash on the hood. Starting in 24, a dealer can say, hey, I've got this nifty EV for you. It costs $50,000, but because we like you, we'll give you that $7,500 off right at the point of purchase. All you have to do is sign over your federal credit to us. So you only have to pay us $42,500 plus all the extras we're going to sell you. So that starts January of 24, but until then, it's still a non-refundable credit. What that means, a non-refundable credit can only offset your income tax liability. That means if you have a $7,500 credit, but your tax bill for that year is only $4,000, you lose $3,500 of that credit. You can't save it, you can't carry it forward, it's non-refundable, you just plain lose it. But the good news is there are ways to increase your tax liability. That's something most people never want to do. But in this case, you do because you want to fully use that credit. So you can move income into the year where you buy the car, or you can move deductions out. For people my age, the best strategy is simply to make a taxable withdrawal from your IRA. Normally, that's going to trigger a tax liability, but in this case, if you have to pump up your tax liability, you can withdraw money from the IRA tax-free because the credit will offset the tax. Now, if you don't really need to make that withdrawal for any purchase, you can still leave it as an IRA, but convert it from a conventional IRA to a Roth IRA. A Roth IRA, as you know, is one where you use tax-paid money to purchase the IRA. And then when you finally redeem the money from the IRA, it's already tax-paid on the principal. You only have to pay on the earnings. So those are all ways that you can increase your liability. Of course, you could also get divorced, but just kidding about that. Now, the big unknown that's been introduced by the Inflation Reduction Act is battery material sources. Now, I'll emphasize this doesn't apply until January. So for right now, there is no battery material requirement, but starting in January, there is. As of January 1st, 40% of all the battery materials that go into the car must be either mined, processed, or recycled in the US or in a nation with a free trade agreement with the US. Now, one of the other handouts that was emailed to you in advance is a list from the government of all the nations that have a free trade agreement with the US. So you can see who those countries are. It's 40% in 23, but it gradually increases every year until it reaches 80% by 26. Currently, only 7% of battery materials are produced in the US. Frankly, most of them come from China. China has deliberately tried to corner that market, and they've done a pretty good job. Now, manufacturers, by the end of this year, must reveal to the IRS exactly the source of all their battery materials. IRS is then going to issue guidance as to how many companies qualify or meet that 40% requirement. I wouldn't bet that they're going to issue that guidance on January 1st, but sometime, hopefully early in 23, the IRS will make an official announcement, and that will tell you which vehicles qualify and which ones don't. Now, a quiz. Everybody knows who makes the world's best-selling EVs, Tesla. Who do you think is number 2? Anybody want to guess? Someone there, I see the mic is moving.
Volkswagen.
That's a good guess, but no. Anybody else? Okay,
BYD in China?
say again.
BYD in China.
Well, perhaps in the world, BYD in China would be the number 2 maker. But in the US market, Hyundai, Kia, the 2 twins from Korea, are the second best-selling EVs in this country. Now, those cars and their complete batteries are built in South Korea. And they lost all tax credits with no hope as of August the 16th of this year when President Biden signed the bill. Now, just this May, Korea had pledged a $10 billion investment in the US to build car and battery manufacturing plants. And they had expected at the time that they would have these plants in production by 2025. This is their thanks for investing in the US. They are, to put it mildly, concerned about this act. The Korean government has officially requested that the US government reconsider that restriction as being unfair to one of their favorite trading partners.
Gary?
Not only that, but the European Union, which hosts, of course, Volkswagen, Jaguar, and a bunch of others, has formally protested the battery source rules in this act as a violation of international trade rules. Now, I don't know how the International Court is going to rule on that case. The only thing we know for sure is they won't rule anytime soon. But if the European Union should win that case, raises an interesting question. Would we be forced to simply change those rules as it affects the European Union? Would it take congressional action? I'm not sure what's going to happen, but the word is stay tuned. There may be some loosening of those requirements, at least for certain parts of the world.
Gary, we have a question.
Go ahead.
It's more of a comment. I had a Kia e-Niro 2019 in my possession, and I really liked it. It had a heat pump. It heated just the area that I was sitting in the driver's seat. It held its charge in my cold garage. But since Michigan is not a clean air state, the 7-year warranty program did not count in Michigan, and I would have had to have gone to New York to have my car serviced. So I decided that that was not good odds for me, but it was a great little car, the Kia e-Niro. And I don't know if you're gonna explore any of that part of us not being a clean air state and anything like that with the cars. But anyhow, I just thought I'd throw that out there since they're the second highest sellers.
Thanks for the comment. I unfortunately do not know what the details are on Michigan being a clean air state. What I do know is that our friends down the road, Elhart, are selling the current Kia Niro. In fact, one of my friends bought one last year. And so far as I know, they are servicing them. And so far as I know, the full warranty is in effect. Now that's on, like the 2022 or 2023 Kia Niro. I don't know that that would affect retroactively older versions. But currently the Kia Niro, I believe, is available for sale and fully supported by Kia. Any other questions before we proceed? Okay. Was that a question?
No, go ahead. There's no
Okay.
questions.
As I said, the big unknown is battery material sources. This is what we talked about. I must have hit the back button. That'll teach me. Here we go. There's a long-term problem with regard to batteries as well. This year, the US, all EVs combined, will be less than 1 million vehicles sold. Now, if the US goes 100% electric, which may be happening within the next 12 or 13 years, we would need on the order of 17.5 million EVs per year. That's a lot of electric vehicles and a lot of batteries. Now, right now, today, the total global production of lithium, cobalt, graphite, nickel, all those rare metals that you need to make a lithium-ion battery are not enough for 17.5 million EVs. So the big question is, what if the whole world is switching to EVs? How many cars would we need? 79 million last year, and growing as more and more people rise out of poverty and join the middle class globally. So the big question, are there enough battery materials in the world to provide for the needs of all the batteries we would need if the whole world goes electric? That's a question that I am not an expert on, but I know that there are lots and lots of people in Detroit and Seoul and Stuttgart and other places that are scrambling like mad to answer that question. Now, some people have said, well, hey, we don't have to worry because recycling may solve our problem. And to some extent, that's true. There are several companies right now that are recycling lithium-ion batteries. A company called Li-Cycle, which is housed in New York, Ohio, Norway, and Germany, is currently recycling those batteries. There's a company called Redwood Materials, which was started by a bunch of Tesla veterans, which is amazingly located right next door to the Tesla Gigafactory in Nevada. And they are recycling Tesla batteries. There's a company called Lithium in Canada that is recycling batteries. And in fact, around the globe, there are a number of startups and established companies that have decided this is going to be a good business. Now, the good news is that 95 to 98% of the materials in a used battery can be recovered. So in one sense, the lithium-ion battery is kind of the poster child for reusability. Now, in the Tesla Gigafactory in Nevada right now, they are currently building batteries for Teslas using recycled materials from, in fact, redwood. But EV volumes are rising so fast that the need for new materials is much, much bigger than can be supplied simply by batteries that have reached the end of their life. Because so far, our experience is that lithium-ion batteries in an electric vehicle last a good long time. There are 2013 Teslas out there that are still cranking along just fine, thank you very much. And they're not ready to give up their battery yet. Generally, you have to crash the thing and ruin the body before that battery is going to be available for recycling. So, one possible rescuer besides recycling is some new ideas that are being pursued about battery designs and battery chemistries. The most famous, of course, is solid-state batteries. There are a lot of companies that are pursuing solid-state batteries. There's a US company called QuantumScape, in which Volkswagen is a major investor. Now, in a recent filing with the Securities and Exchange Commission, they said that 4 out of the top 10 global automakers have signed contracts with them to purchase and evaluate solid-state batteries. One of those 4 companies proposes to build a 50 gigawatt-hour factory that would produce enough batteries for 500,000 cars a year. And they're hoping for volume production by 2025. Well, we can kind of guess who one of those 4 companies is, since Volkswagen is a major investor. But the other 3, we don't know. What we do know is that these solid-state batteries that have already been built and evaluated by QuantumScape can go from empty to 80% full in 15 minutes. That in itself is a huge sales factor for solid-state batteries. There's an Israeli company called StoreDot, and their goal is strictly a faster charging battery. Right now, they are offering to automakers a battery with their proprietary electrolyte, which can charge add 100 miles to your range in only 5 minutes of charging. Now, by 2028, they expect to have a battery that can be recharged, gaining 100 miles every 3 minutes. That would be a pure solid state battery, only 6 years from now. Now, their special sauce is that they have a proprietary organic nanoparticles that make up the solid state separator in the battery. A company called Solid Power is another US company. They're already making smaller solid state batteries, think, iPhone size, but they've got a factory in in Colorado, that's producing them now. They are currently building a pilot plant to make batteries large enough for use in automotive. They are projecting, that's more like a hope, but they believe that they will have their batteries in some cars on the road within 6 years.
Hey, Gary, we have a question online for you. In terms of finding battery ingredients, do you have any insight to the mining of the ocean floor? Who has the rights to mine and who has the capability?
Capability, I would imagine there are a number of nations that have that ability, or that can develop that capability. Who has the right? That's a question above my pay grade. Any other questions online or in the class? Okay. There's another company making solid state batteries called Ampsera. Again, it's a US company, and they're simply competing to provide solid state separators for battery makers. They want to provide that solid state divider between the cathode and the anode. There's a company in Taiwan called Prologium that already has a pilot battery production plant up and running. And they are already providing full-scale electric vehicle samples to automakers, anybody that's willing to take one, and they're simply asking the companies to evaluate their batteries for use. They have said they are seeking a North American factory site, but they have not yet made any commitment to build a factory in the US. Again, I think the Inflation Reduction Act is going to be a further incentive for them to find a North American site if in fact they can sign up a manufacturer to use their battery. And last but not least, Toyota, one of the largest companies in the world. They have over 1,000 patents globally on solid state battery technology. Furthermore, they already have solid state batteries running in cars, they call them mules, cars that were originally intended for something else, but they've just retrofitted them with a solid state battery. They're driving around in Japan right now. To get more real world experience with solid state, Toyota has said that starting in 25, the Toyota Prius will have solid state batteries, and they're going to, of course, monitor the daylights out of those things to get all the data they can on how that solid state battery reacts to all kinds of weather and conditions and treatment. They'll probably monitor everything except how many left turns you make. And finally, Honda, another Japanese company. Honda, as you may recall, is not large enough to have an R&D arm that can compete with Toyota. So they are pretty much partnering with General Motors. They are building a pilot production line in Japan for solid state batteries that is not shared with General Motors. They are building some conventional lithium-ion battery plants in the United States, joint with GM. But this is their only solid state production line. It is in Japan, and they are hoping to be producing at volume in only 2 years. And they're saying they, quote, hope to deploy these batteries in cars, in Honda cars, by the end of the decade. So they're putting a lot of money and effort behind the desire to be one of the first to have a solid state battery in a Honda car. There's another new idea that's not really going to affect the battery materials issue, but it's an interesting thing. It's called cell to pack technology. Currently, if you buy an electric vehicle, it will have electric cells that have the cathode, the electrolyte, and the anode. That's what makes the electricity. Quite often, they are the size of a AA cell phone battery or a flashlight battery. They gather a bunch of those cells into a module and connect them all up so that the module then becomes a larger, handier unit of electric production. Then they gather many of those modules together into what's called the battery pack. The battery pack is the level at which they do battery management, battery monitoring, heating and cooling. All that stuff is normally done at the pack level. General Motors has invented their own battery pack system called the Ultium battery pack that's done some very creative things with battery management and battery conditioning at the pack level. But some people are saying, hey, let's just skip the module. Let's take batteries in the cell, let's take packs and just load them with lots of individual cells. This becomes much more practical if the cells are larger than a AA battery. Some people talk about pouch cells. Tesla has talked about their 4680 cell. All of these tend to be larger, and they would lend themselves to simply having a whole bunch of them put together into a pack. As I say, this doesn't affect the battery materials issue, but it's an interesting idea that may simplify and reduce the cost of electric vehicle batteries. Of course, the big question with all of this new stuff is when. The rule of thumb, at least from my world, is that to go from the lab to the real world usually takes about 5 years to get into the real world use. Now, automakers are usually eager to get cheaper, faster charging batteries, and they would be very happy to hurry. But a new car design used to take 7 years. Now they're accelerating it to something like 4 years, but still, it takes a long time to integrate something new. Every time you come up with a new component of a car, it has to be interfaced with every other part of the car. Then you've got to take that car and test it in all kinds of weather and conditions before you can put it out there and put a warranty on it. The whole idea is that you want to find and fix the points of failure before you start selling the car. Any of you that are familiar with Tesla's history know that they first started selling the Model S, I believe, in 2013. And something that they never anticipated was that in an area of the car just over the battery pack, they had a device that could cause condensation to gather. And in certain weather conditions, it would drip on the battery. And when it dripped on the battery long enough, it would actually cause the battery to corrode and fail. It was not until 2016 that that problem really came to light. Tesla quickly fixed it. But, you know, that's the kind of thing you only find out in the real world. There's no way you can do a lab test to look for those kinds of problems. So it's going to take time for new battery designs and chemistries to reach cars. Now, my new car, which I think I've mentioned is being manufactured today, has a conventional lithium-ion battery. My last car was a plug-in hybrid. My next car, maybe that I'll buy in 2028 or 2029, maybe will have a solid-state battery. And then again, maybe not. It all depends on who can work out all the wrinkles and actually get something into production at a price we can afford, and how quickly. Okay, before we go on to a survey of currently available vehicles, are there any questions online or in the classroom that we should address?
We do have one question here in the classroom.
Gary, perhaps you have some insight on the historical nature of the conventional batteries in internal combustion engine cars. I bring this up because we, in our lifetime, have seen interchangeability between a battery from Delco or from Sears or anybody else. You can buy them and put them into your car. It doesn't really matter who the manufacturer was. Now we're looking at multiple designs of new technology, and they probably will not be interchangeable from one model to another. And of course, the battery pack is very different from a 12-volt battery that we buy today. But can you address the fact that there may have been a time 100 years ago when cars were electric, where they were testing the waters and they had variety then, and now we're going to have variety again, and we won't have standards?
Well, I think your observation is dead on. Every manufacturer or manufacturing group is spending literally hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars to try to develop their own battery electric platform. General Motors is very proud of what they've come up with. They call it their Ultium platform. That's what the Hummer and the Cadillac Lyriq are built on, and all future GM electrics will be built on that platform. That is proprietary. Everybody else has their proprietary system. I do not see any time in the next 10 years that you're going to have anything approaching interchangeability. Now, I should note that there was a company called Better Place in Israel that tried to introduce the concept of a replaceable battery, where instead of pulling into a charging station and plugging in for anywhere from 20 minutes to an hour, you would pull into a battery exchange station, drop out your old battery, drop in a new one. It would take less than 8 minutes and you'd go on your way. That company failed financially. There is another company in China that is trying that idea out. I have not heard whether they're doing well or not. But even that is something that would be proprietary to a particular brand of car. Interchangeability, I think, is a long way off if it ever happens.
Gary, I would make another comment about that. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this in my charging session next week. If you look at the designs of the battery systems in the EVs that are being produced today, they're very much integrated into the frame and the body of the car, such that they're inherently not interchangeable in terms of how that particular pack is configured for that particular vehicle. So it's at the stage we're at today, there's virtually, it would seem to me that there's not a real opportunity for interchangeability.
We do also have one question online of how does the move to solid state batteries affect the basic material requirements?
That's a good question. The materials in a solid state battery are different from a conventional lithium ion battery. And there are, each company has their own take on, just exactly how it's different. But clearly the electrolyte materials are completely eliminated. And some of the companies are experimenting with anodes and cathodes that are made of things other than these rare earths. There's a lot of research going into a pure silicon anode, I believe it is, which has a lot of technical advantages, but it's also got some serious real world problems that they're trying desperately to solve. Solid state batteries, I believe, will provide some relief from the battery material crunch, but it certainly is not a magic bullet. Any other questions? Okay, let's go on then. Excuse
Gary,
me, go ahead.
ask a question. You've left us with a great mystery as far as what vehicle Gary Morris is driving right now. The hybrid, the plug-in that you have, are you willing to let us know?
Oh, sure. 6 years ago, or no, 10 years ago, I bought a Toyota Camry hybrid. It had no plug. It was just a pure hybrid. Wonderful car. Loved that car. In February of 18, we bought a Honda Clarity. That's a plug-in hybrid. That's the car I'm driving right now that I'm going to be passing on to my grandson. I love that car. It's been a wonderful vehicle, and I expect it to last forever. And our new car is going to be a Mustang Mach-E. So soon I will have covered the universe. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. I drive a Chevy Volt right now, and I realize that GM must have had a good idea because they stopped making them in 2019.
Not only did GM stop making the Volt, but the following year, Honda stopped making the Clarity. And I'll talk a little bit about why that's true in just a few minutes. So that's a good lead-in question. So without further ado, let's just kind of do a quick survey. I am not going to talk about every vehicle that's on the market. The third document that was sent to you in the pre-class materials is a spreadsheet with something like 100 entries of all the hybrids, plug-in hybrids, and battery electrics that are currently available or will be available for order in just a few months. Can't possibly talk about them all, so we're going to be skimming the highlights. But we're going to talk about all three categories. First of all, let's just talk quickly about pure hybrids. Now, in a pure hybrid, all power comes from gasoline. There is no plug, and of course, there is no range anxiety. Now, a pure hybrid is absolutely the most eco-friendly combustion engine car you can buy. It's also the least eco-friendly electrified vehicle, but it's a step in the right direction. Now, some companies, especially this year, have been putting a 48-volt start-stop system. That's something that mimics the original Prius behavior. You pull up to a stoplight, the engine stops. You don't have to do anything when you press the accelerator when the light turns green, and your engine starts automatically. That takes a 48-volt system to do that kind of stopping and starting. A lot of manufacturers are adding those and claiming that their car is therefore a hybrid. I have a problem with that. There are some gains in efficiency because you're not putting fumes in the air while you're sitting at a stoplight, but they are minimal. In my opinion, a true hybrid can travel at low speed for up to a half a mile on battery only. Like if you're in a traffic jam, your engine should not be running. You should just be crawling along based on the battery. And also a true hybrid is going to have regenerative braking, where every time you hit the brake pedal, you don't engage a brake pad. You simply get your traction motors running backwards, recharging your battery. That to me is a pure hybrid. There are some amazing vehicles in this category. The best medium-sized sedans, in my opinion, are two. One of them is the Honda Accord hybrid. It is a, they call it a mid-size. I think of it as full-size anymore. It's a 5-passenger, very roomy, very modern sedan, 47 miles per gallon combined. The car has been restyled for 23. It's very attractive. And of course, Hondas are legendary for their reliability. Their biggest competitor is the car I used to have, the Toyota Camry hybrid. The current version of the Camry hybrid gets 51 miles per gallon city and 53 highway in a 5-passenger sedan with all the bells and whistles. If I'd have tried to tell you that 10 years ago, you'd have laughed me out of court. But they've done it. And again, Toyotas are absolutely famous for their reliability. You buy one, you better like it because it's going to last a long time. Another category that is becoming popular is hybrid SUVs. Now, Consumer Reports every year, does lots and lots of vehicle testing. And at the end of year, they come up with their best in class ratings. They recently released theirs for 2022. And they said in the class of small SUVs, not just hybrids, but all small SUVs, the very best one to buy is a Hyundai Tucson hybrid. And part of the reason for it is because it has rather amazing fuel economy for an SUV, 35 miles to the gallon. And because the battery is fairly small, the price premium is not very much. Base price of $30,000, you can gussy them up to about $40,000. Consumer Reports also said in the mid-size SUV category, the best vehicle to buy, Toyota Highlander hybrid. That's a 3-row seating SUV. It's very good size. It still gets 35 miles to the gallon in a 3-row SUV. The price is a little higher. They start at 40 and can go up to 50. But these are two cars that just in general are considered to be best of class, and they're hybrids. Now, the next step up toward electrified vehicles, you have to have a plug. A plug-in hybrid is a bridge technology. It is a step between internal combustion and a pure electric vehicle. Now, frankly, a plug-in hybrid like the one I'm currently driving is the most complex car they have ever built. My Honda Clarity has a full internal combustion drivetrain with, oil and radiators and transmissions and all that stuff, plus a full electric vehicle drivetrain such that I can drive around town for, 30, 40 miles a day with just electric. Plus, it has all the engineering required to smoothly switch between the two. That's a whale of a lot of engineering in one car. Both the Volt and the Clarity were very successful at this, but frankly, the companies couldn't make any money on them because it was just so complicated to build. So neither the Volt nor the Clarity is being manufactured anymore. There are others, but those two leading plug-in hybrids are no longer available. Now, the big advantage of a plug-in hybrid, of course, is that for most of us, you do 100% of your local driving on electric, which is cheap, it is smooth, it is quiet, it's eco-friendly, and every night you charge it up in the garage or maybe at your office, so you don't have to fool with gas stations unless you're going on a trip. But there's no range anxiety because anytime the battery is exhausted, if you want to go on a long trip, you simply burn gas. I have taken my Honda Clarity out to Idaho this past summer and drove through some places where even gas stations were hard to find. I had no problems. I was just burning gas. Every time I had a chance, I'd go ahead and charge up the battery, but those chances were few and far between out west. Now, if we're going to talk about plug-in hybrids, I've got to mention the granddaddy of them all, the Prius, and specifically the Prius Prime. Now, most Priuses are pure hybrids, but the Prius Prime is a plug-in hybrid. You can get 25 miles of pure electric range, which would take you in and out of Holland quite a few times. When you're running on gas, you're getting 54 miles to the gallon. And get this, the base price is only $28K. Now, of course, lots of options and things, including unexpected price increases, can happen, but it's very competitively priced. The 2023 Prius should be on sale soon. I suspect that the base price will have gone up a bit, but still, it's a very affordable car. And as I mentioned, in either 25 or 26, you can expect that car to have a solid state battery. Now, on that spreadsheet that was emailed to you, there are 28 other plug-in hybrid models, and they come from across the range of manufacturers: Audi, BMW, Hyundai, Jeep, Lexus, Lincoln, Porsche. If you're a Volvo fan, I've got good news. Volvo has decided to put a plug in almost all of their cars. So if you're a fan of one of those, like in the lower left, you're in good shape. You can buy plug-in hybrids other than the Prius for as little as $30,000, or you can spend up to $110,000. But if you are interested in going this half step toward full electric, you have lots of choices. Of course, the main event where we're all trying to get is battery electrics. Battery electrics are the future, and now everybody admits it. I don't know how many of you people actually watch broadcast TV, but you know, when I want to watch a football game, it's my only choice. If you believed all those ads and didn't read any fine print, you would think that all anybody is making anymore is electric vehicles. You can't get through a football game without at least a dozen ads from 5 or 6 different companies telling you about their new electric SUVs, their new electric sedan, you name it. Truth is, almost all those ads are talking about cars that are not yet available, most of them. Because with the high cost of batteries, there is still a significant price premium, and a lot of these manufacturers have been slow to get the message that, hey, they need to do this. So now they're trying to catch up. They can't catch up with their manufacturing, so they're trying to catch up with their advertising. But about that price premium, it's clear that if you want a battery electric right now, you're going to pay a premium at first. But Consumer Reports last year did an in-depth study in computing the total cost of ownership over the life of a car. They found that having an electrified vehicle, either a plug-in hybrid or a pure battery electric, is going to save you thousands of dollars compared to the cost of a comparable vehicle with a gas engine. And the reasons are obvious. You're not paying for gas or oil. You don't have a drive shaft. You don't have exhaust systems, all that stuff. There's dramatically less maintenance because there's only a few moving parts. Your brake pads will hardly ever get used because in an electric vehicle, when you hit the brake pedal, just like in my plug-in hybrid, you're not actuating a brake pad. You're simply using the traction motors being run backwards by the tires to generate electricity, which is recharging your battery. In some cars, up to 95% of the energy that was used to accelerate is recovered when you do regenerative braking to decelerate. So the brake pads are hardly ever used except for the last, say, from 15 miles down to 0. My car's got 87,000 miles on it, and my brake pads look brand new. Plus, of course, there's the convenience of not having to go to gas stations. You do all your charging at home or at work. And with caveats, which we will discuss, battery electrics qualify for max tax credits if they are made in North America and if the battery sourcing requirements are met. We'll talk about those details later. If you're a graphic kind of person, here's another way of looking at it. And I think we've got enough time I can tell you a story. About 8 years ago, when Tesla had first hit the market, General Motors has a very large building, north part of Detroit, which looks like a huge warehouse. It's their teardown facility. Every time one of their competitors comes out with an interesting vehicle, they send someone, incognito into a dealership, and they buy one, bring it over there, and then their engineers take it apart in a very carefully orchestrated way so that, every nut and bolt and washer is laid out in exactly the same way so they can compare how one car is made compared to another. Well, the first time they brought a Prius, this was a Model S, into that teardown facility, the manager of the teardown facility took one look at it and called the chief of R&D, who is the one who told me the story. He said, "You got to come see this." He showed him first the teardown on a Chevy Impala. Then they saw the teardown of a Prius, which had both the battery electric and the gas. Then he showed him the teardown of the Tesla. And the chief of R&D said, "Our CEO has got to see this now." They brought in Rick Wagner, who was then the CEO of General Motors, saw the same thing and said, "My word, we got to alert the board. We got to talk to the union because these cars have so few moving parts. It just isn't going to take that much effort to put one together. We're going to lose thousands of employees." When you look at this diagram, you can see what he was talking about. These are all the components of the drivetrain of an electric vehicle. It has been computed, not by me, but by Discovery Magazine, compared to the number of moving parts in a gas engine equivalent car, the electric vehicle has only 1% as many moving parts. It's a simple machine. Simplicity is efficient. It is elegant. It's beautiful. And it's the future. Now, I know you can't read the fine print, but this is a graph of all U.S. electric vehicle sales year to date for this year. The two lines on top are huge. Anybody want to guess which cars those two lines are? Doesn't take much guessing. That's the Tesla Model Y and the Tesla Model 3. All the other guys are those shorter lines. Now, if you believe that old advertisement, "A million Frenchmen can't be wrong, so this perfume must be the best." If you think that sales success is the best indicator of what's the best car, don't look any farther than a Tesla. They are without question the runaway bestseller in the US and in the world. 2/3 of all the electric vehicles sold in the globe, including all those Chinese brands, 2/3 of the sales are Teslas. They have earned that success. They have been the pioneers of electric vehicles. So far this year, they have sold 164,000 Model 3s and Ys from their 2 gigafactories in Nevada and Texas. And frankly, they're cranking them out as fast as they can. They've still got huge backlogs. Tesla is without question the yardstick by which every other manufacturer measures their product. So if you believe that you want a US car that is the sales leader, end of discussion. However, there is that little thing of supply and demand. Backlogs for Teslas are large and they're growing. Now, like any rational player in a market, if you've got more people clamoring to buy your product than you can make product, well, you can reduce that backlog by raising your price. In the last 18 months, the base price of a Model 3 has gone up by by over $12,000. The base price on a Model Y has gone up by $16,000. And despite that fact, they've still got a backlog of orders for these cars. They can't make them fast enough. So if sales success is your indicator of what to buy, stop looking right there. But, maybe you have other criteria. Consumer Reports and Motor Trend have both done extensive testing and analysis of all the electric vehicles, including the Teslas. And I must admit that when they first tested the Model S of Tesla, Consumer Reports reported that car broke the rating scale. They used to have a rating scale in which they thought 100 was the most points any car could get. Tesla got over 100. It's an excellent car, no question. But this year, when Consumer Reports and Motor Trend looked at the whole market and said, what's the best electric vehicle to buy this year? Guess what they picked? The Mustang Mach-E. So if you think careful cerebral analysis of the market should be your guide, you ought to seriously consider buying an electric Ford. Now, if you've never seen a Mach-E, which by the way, you'll be able to look at next week at the showcase, Mayor Nathan Box has kindly offered to bring his car down and he'll stand there and tell you about how he likes it. Ford dealers are required to sell this car at MSRP. There are other companies that don't have that rule and it's the Wild West, but a Ford dealer that tries to charge you anything above MSRP is in danger of losing their franchise. I can assure you Barber Ford is selling them at list price. It is the best-selling non-Tesla in the US so far this year, and they too have a backlog. We've had to wait about 3 months for ours, and depending on when you place an order right now, you might have to wait longer than that. The base price jumped up quite a bit for 23. I think it went up about $4,000 or $5,000 this year. And again, that's partly because they got them and we want them. But still, for a very well-equipped and very nice electric vehicle, $46,900 is the base price. It is North American built in Mexico. And as I say, the wait is about 3 to 5 months if you wanted to order one now. The deposit, which is fully refundable, is only $500. Now, maybe you don't want a magazine or other buyers to tell you what to buy. You want to do your own analysis and you've decided, by cracky, I want the best technology out there. I want an 800-volt system. Now, almost all electric cars, including Teslas right now, are 400 volt, which is pretty high voltage. But there are some technical reasons why an 800 volt system is considerably more advanced. And they're out there. Audi e-tron, the Q4, with a base price of $49,000. It's an 800 volt system. The Hyundai Ioniq 5 with a base price of $43K is an 800 volt system, but sorry, you can't buy one in Michigan. You'd have to go to Maryland to buy one. Kia EV6, which is the cousin of the Ioniq 5, is available in Michigan right down the street. And their base price is $41,000. Or if you would like a super hot sports car for a mere $88,000, you can get an 800 volt Porsche Taycan. Now, there's no question, most observers say that eventually all EVs, or almost all EVs, will be 800 volts because of the technical advantages. 800 volt systems have lower weight and they have better range. I don't understand why, but an 800 volt system has greater thermal efficiency than 400. Don't ask me why. The big deal is with an 800 volt system, you can charge from 10% to 80% in 18 minutes. Now that requires a 350 kilowatt or minimum 250 kilowatt charger, but since the Porsche is part of the the VW family, and VW is sponsoring and paying for the Electrify America charging network, guess what? Every Electrify America charging station has at least one 350 kilowatt fast charger that can charge an 800 volt system. And other networks are picking up on that. Dave, I'm sure we'll talk more about that next Tuesday. So if you want to go for the best, most advanced technology out there, maybe you want to consider one of these 800 volt systems. Or, you know, maybe you're just loyal to a certain brand. I mean, when I grew up as a little kid, I didn't know who was in favor of Michigan versus Michigan State, but boy, I knew who were the Ford families and who were the Chevy families. We were a Chevy family. wouldn't dream of driving anything else. I think that kind of brand loyalty has kind of faded, but nonetheless, if you are a patient Chevy fan, I have good news for you. Chevy has definitely been late to the party. They are well behind Ford in rolling out a full electric lineup. Right now, you've only got two choices. You can buy a Chevy Bolt with a B with a base price of less than 30, or you can buy a Hummer for 120,000. And right now that's it, or a Lyriq if you can get your hands on one. But the Chevy Blazer for 24, the electric version of the Blazer is going to be available next summer. Base price is currently 45 to 48K. Excuse me, 45 to 48K, depending on the trim level. It's a very well equipped, full-size SUV, and it is on General Motors Ultium platform, which is a very nicely engineered battery pack. If you want one, you can put in an order right now. The deposit's only $100. As I say, it's going to be available in quote summer 23. Given the difficulty that most companies have had in getting their electric vehicle production lines up to full speed, summer goes until September 20th. But I think if you're willing to be patient, that's a very attractive looking car at a very attractive price. Furthermore, their compact crossover, the Equinox, is going to have an electric version that will be available in the fall of next year. Base price, $30,000. That's only a little bit more than the base price on their current Bolt, which, if I may be candid, is 10-year-old technology. This car is built from the ground up as an EV. It's on the Ultium platform, and there are going to be loads of trim and power options. I believe you can order that car as front-wheel drive, rear-wheel drive, or all-wheel drive. Two different battery sizes, lots and lots of options. If they can produce those things fast enough, they're going to sell a ton of them. Now, the Blazer, you can put in an order to deposit right now. They're not yet taking orders, to the best of my knowledge, on the Equinox. But if you go to the Chevy website, you can register your email address, and they will let you know when first day orders will be accepted. And I would imagine there's going to be a lot of first day orders. So if this aggressive pricing holds, I think Chevy is going to sell a lot of EVs. So I mentioned there's a spreadsheet that lists all the hybrids, plug-in hybrids, and battery electrics. There are 32 battery electric models on that spreadsheet. And as I mentioned, there are some more very nice ones coming in 24. But just about everybody out there has at least one battery electric available, including, niche brands, BMW, Genesis, Jaguar. If you want to go for the for the top end right now, that would be Lucid, a company you may not have heard of, but believe me, you will. You can buy Mercedes, Subarus, Toyotas. Everybody has a battery electric either out there or quickly coming onto the market. I will point out that Mercedes has been, not real quick in this market segment, but they have designated an entire series called the EQ series. All their electrics will be in that series, and they're going to be rolling out as early as next year. Toyota has already announced their BZ4X, and it has a twin, the Subaru Solterra. Also, Nissan has an entry called the Ariya. All of these are very, very hard to get your hands on right now, but they'll become more widely available in 23. The Cadillac Lyriq is, quote, available now, but when we talked to Crown Cadillac and asked them if we could please have a Lyriq to display in our EV showcase next week, they said, hey, there is one Lyriq demonstrator for the entire Midwest. It's not our week to have it. But, when our week comes, anybody that's interested can come in and look at one. It's still very limited production, but that's the Lyriq that's built on the Ultium platform in Tennessee. It's going to be more widely available sometime next year. And there's a new category this year, and that's trucks, because of some very interesting developments over the last 12 to 18 months. Electric trucks are now a very competitive market. It all started when a small startup just north of Detroit called Rivian introduced their R1T truck and their R1S SUV. These are vehicles that were designed from the ground up with a clean sheet of paper as electric trucks. And when they first showed off their prototypes, the world took note. Every truck designer in Detroit went to go see that thing. For 23, it has a base price of $68,000. Last year, the base price was in the 50s. But Rivian, when they started building these at their factory in Normal, Illinois, discovered that there were a lot of startup costs, and so they were just going to increase the base price for 23. And they tried to retroactively apply that to everybody who'd already put in a reservation. And the people that had reservations basically took to the streets with torches and pitchforks and said, you can't do that. Rivian quickly backed off and said they would honor the price that was quoted when those people made their deposits. Well, Rivian created such a stir, Ford bought 15% of the company right away. Amazon bought 20% because they've all felt that Rivian had the world by the tail. There was even some talk for a while about Ford using the Rivian truck as their own. They've changed that plan, obviously. Amazon has ordered 100,000 electric delivery vans from Rivian. Their financial security is airtight. Now, Ford, as I say, bought a part of Rivian. Their engineers decided they better get in the game. And frankly, they did a pretty amazing job. The Ford F-150 Lightning was a game changer because that's the most popular vehicle in North America. And when that became electric, everybody said, oh, this is for real. Now, for 23, if you order a Lightning, and there will be one, by the way, at the EV showcase next week. So if you would like to kick tires on it or crawl in the frunk, come on out. Base price this year is $52,000. Last year, the base price on a 22 Lightning was $40,000. Again, Ford has found they've got very strong demand, and they would like to make a little more money on it. So they have raised their price by $12,000. This car is being built in Dearborn at a plant right next door to the River Rouge plant. You can't tour it, but you can at least wave at it when you take the River Rouge tour. Chevy, as I said, has been a little bit late to the game, but they have announced that they have an electric version of the Silverado that will be available next year. And they are advertising a $42,000 base price. Now, given what's happened to base prices on other trucks, you may draw your own conclusions. But I think if you want to get an electric truck for $42,000, you better reserve it now to lock in that price, because I guarantee you once they get a long backup, that price is going to go up. Now, I need to say a word about modern EV buying. What you're going to have to do if you want to buy an electric vehicle is not go to some dealership, take one for a ride and say, I want to buy that one. Nope, you can't do it. Most dealers don't have an electric vehicle on their lot that isn't already bought and paid for by somebody before it ever arrived. What you do is you make a $100 to up to $500 refundable deposit on every car that you might want. Then you wait 3 to 9 months even to find out what the final manufacturer's price is going to be on the cars that you ordered, and maybe get a possible build date. Only when you've taken delivery of the one that you want do you then cancel your orders for the other cars and get your refunds back. That's how it is with every manufacturer except one. Not with Tesla. As I've said, they can't make them fast enough. They've got a huge backlog. So if you want a Tesla, you're going to have to put down a $2,500 deposit, which is refundable, but As soon as they give you a vehicle ID number and offer you a purchase contract, which I understand is happening within a matter of weeks, once you sign that contract, the $2,500 is no longer refundable. If you back out, then you lose the money. Now, as I said, it's getting complicated. So for our last topic, I want to just quickly remind you of the rules for purchasing new EVs under this Inflation Reduction Act. As I say, these rules are for cars that are placed in use in 23 through 32. So there's a long period of stability anticipated. There are income limits. You can only qualify for federal tax credits if you're an individual with 150,000 or less, or a married couple with 300,000 or less in gross income. Adjusted gross, I should say. There is a price limit. You can only get federal tax credits for a sedan that you purchase for 55,000 or less, or for a truck or SUV that you purchase for 80,000 or less. And of course, the car has to be assembled in North America. And there was a full list as part of your package. If the vehicle is assembled in North America, you automatically get a $3,750 credit. In addition, if 40% of the battery materials are from the US or one of our trading partners, again, see that list, then an additional $3,750 credit is available for a total of $7,500. Now, the IRS is supposed to give guidance in writing on the battery materials for every car sold in this country in 2023. Personally, I would not bet on that being available on New Year's Day. Now, for the first time, we have some anecdotal data, which is only good as hearsay. But in last week's quarterly call to investors, the CEO of GM, Mary Barra, noted that GM thinks that several of its models are going to be eligible for the 3750 immediately on January 1st. And furthermore, she thinks that they will be eligible for the full $7,500 credit 2 or 3 years after that. I'm guessing that that's their most optimistic figure, but she thinks that for at least the next couple of years, 3750 is all you're going to get on a GM product. I have some friends who have ordered a 23 Mustang that is not scheduled for production until March. Their dealer told them that they would probably qualify for, quote, about 4,000 in tax credits. So the Ford dealer locally believes that only 3,750 is what the new Mustang will get. However, at Tesla's recent earnings call, Elon Musk, who, as we know, is always very careful about what he says, said that they expect to meet the battery source requirements immediately. Now, that's Musk talk. If the IRS confirms that, they will be the only vehicle available with a full $7,500 credit as of January 1st. Now, since they make both the cars and the batteries at their gigafactories, this is a credible claim. We'll just have to stay tuned. My personal impression.
Gary, we have a question here.
Okay.
On the $55,000 and under category in order to qualify, I'm guessing the Mustang you ordered is more than that.
Actually, the Mustang, I believe, is a little more than that, but the Mustang is classed as an SUV. So is the Tesla Model Y. Okay. So is the Chevy Blazer, the Chevy Equinox. They were very careful to make sure that these vehicles would be taxed as an SUV. So it's an $80,000 limit that applies to the Mustang. I am fully counting on that $7,500 credit. Any other questions? We're almost at the end here. Okay.
One more. We have one more question.
Go ahead.
And I was looking at a Mach-E. The battery content qualifies as well as the manufacturing location. So it certainly is available. The $7,500 credit is available, certainly, or you're just hoping it is?
Well, my car is being made today, and I expect it to be delivered within 2 or 3 weeks. So I will definitely purchase and place in use in tax year 22. Because the old rules are in effect until December 31st, I will get the full $7,500 credit no matter where the batteries come from, simply because it was assembled in North America. However, beginning January 1st, the Ford, at least according to the local dealer, they're only expecting to qualify for the $3,750 for being assembled in North America. They do not think that they're going to meet the battery source requirements, at least not out of the gate. Okay. Now, my personal impression is that every automaker that sells in the US, even if they have US assembly plants, they're still in a mad scramble trying to secure US sourced battery materials. You don't build a battery factory overnight. It's going to take them years if they don't already meet the requirements to do that. But of course, that was the whole idea of the Inflation Reduction Act. It was to put a gun to the head of the manufacturers saying, we want you to bring more and more of the manufacturing for all the components for these cars into the US, so it supplies good US jobs and of course, US taxes. Now, one new wrinkle, which is going to become more and more significant as time goes on, there are now tax credits for purchasing used EVs. As of January 1st, if you purchase and place in use a used EV in 23 through supposedly through 32, if it is purchased from a dealer, it is 2 or more model years old and has a price of $25,000 or less, then it qualifies for a credit of 30% of the purchase price up to a maximum of $4,000. That is, and there's no restriction on where the car was built, no restriction on where the battery was built. Any used EV, including a used Bentley for that matter, if you can find one for under 25K, any used EV for the next 10 years will qualify for this. There are some limitations. Every car can only qualify for the credit once in its lifetime. So once it has been purchased from a dealer with the credit, then no matter how many other times that car is resold, no credit. Furthermore, the buyer must be a person, not a business, and a person can only get one used EV credit every 3 years. So if you want to buy a used EV and then get a later model every 3 years, you can get the credit every 3 years. There's also lower income requirements. Now, these are about half of the requirements for new EVs. To get the credit, it must be an individual with less than $75,000 in income or a couple with less than $150K. But no restrictions on where it's built or the battery sources. So my conclusion is, it is the best of times and it is the worst of times. But for 10 years, we'll know what the rules are. Maybe, depending on how various protests and international court cases proceed. So we're there. Questions, comments, pushback?
We have a question from Louis.
In the scheme of things, this is less important, but I'm surprised by the position that the Costa Rican government is taking. I've had the privilege of visiting the country on a few occasions, and I was pleased to see that in San Jose, the capital, they have decreed that depending on whether your license plate number ends in an odd or even number, you're allowed to drive into the city on a given work day. So they're trying to limit the number of vehicles in the city and to promote carpooling. It's also a country that promotes ecotourism profusely. So why would it be that this country would wait until 2050 to ban internal combustion engines?
Short answer, beats me.
Me too.
What other questions do we have?
I actually have a question for you. We talked a lot about the vehicles available and the price. I don't have those charts that you sent out in advance, but do you list the range on each vehicle so you can understand whether they go 100, 200, or how many miles? Because living with an EV is different than buying one, and the range is really important.
Excellent question, Sue. Yes, on the spreadsheet printout that was sent to everybody who's enrolled in the class, I don't list range for hybrids because, of course, they all run on gas. But for plug-in hybrids and for battery electrics, I do list the EPA-rated electric range for those vehicles.
I have a question about the fact that many of the things that are in the car, whether it's the radio or anything else, are all electric. And that this eats into the battery. Has there been any discussion about maybe isolating some of those functions to another battery source, or to going back to some kind of a mechanical thing to improve on range? Because that's really, I think, what makes no sense to me as I've looked at electric vehicles and driven them. And if it's hot out and you turn the air on, you can just see the range disappearing. And so it creates a greater unknown. Is there any discussion about that?
That's an excellent point, and I'll tell you what little I know. Dave may be able to supplement this. Even in a car that has a battery electric drive, there's also a 12-volt system. That 12-volt system runs things like your clock, your radio, and other electric or electronic things in the car that are all 12-volt. The two big exceptions to that are the cabin heater and the cabin air conditioner. Those are major draws, and I think in almost every electric vehicle I know of, those systems are run off the main drive battery. And it's true. If you're going down the road and your EV says, hey, I've got 302 miles of range, and then you decide to turn the air conditioner on full blast, it will very quickly revise that range statement to some lower number to allow for the fact that you're using some kilowatts for cooling the car. Now, some cars, including some Kias, some Hyundais, and I forget one or two other, I think the Lucid Air, are putting heat pumps instead of air conditioners into the cars. It's a little more expensive than putting in just an electrically driven air conditioner, but it allows you to use a heat pump to draw air from the outside heat instead of simply using an induction or resistance electric heater to heat the car. So if you buy a car that has a heat pump, that will not reduce your range as much as a car that doesn't have it. And that's the extent of my knowledge. Dave, do you want to supplement?
Yes, basically you covered it. What you're going to find is, and my wife gets a little nervous, a little range anxiety. And so we've done some experiments about when you're running the air conditioning, when you're running the heater. And to Gary's point, when it tells you how many miles are left, how quickly you're consuming miles versus the actual miles you moved. And so we did some experiments this summer, and when you turn all that stuff off, it's a direct correlation of you went a mile on the road, the battery went down a mile. You have that stuff on and it varies, but Gary's point is dead on. Oh shoot, there was another point. Oh, the other big thing is in the wintertime. The wintertime in our Tesla Y, our experience is when it's very cold out. And when I say that, I mean like 20 degrees or thereabouts. You lose about 20 to 25% of the distance of the distance you can drive on the battery. And so when you buy these cars, you just have to learn about how the engineering of that car affects your performance. And so you just have to pay attention. So, yeah.
Good point, Dave. And I will add to that the manufacturers who understand that range is a big part of their selling factor are experimenting with a number of different things. There are some makers that are currently spending a lot of engineering on what they call battery conditioning, where they will actually heat or cool the battery to get it to an ideal temperature, because temperature does affect battery efficiency. Likewise, when you're charging a car in the winter, you normally will not get as large a usable range out of that charge as you would if you charged it in the summer. But some manufacturers will allow you to hit a precondition button before you pull into the charger, and it will actually precondition your battery to warm it up to think that it's summer outside, so that it will gain more electricity. This is getting into the fine points, and if you talk to the average dealer about this, they'll look at you funny.
And that particular topic, battery reconditioning, I'll be talking about that, or not reconditioning, sorry, preconditioning. I've done a bunch of experiments and I have some graphs and so forth that I'll be showing next week to talk about that. Preconditioning is a big deal. Some cars support it, some don't. In the Tesla world, it's a big deal. I'll talk about it next week.
I'm looking forward to your talk.
Gary, we have one final question. I know we're past time, but this is from online. And Paul said that he pulls a small car behind his motorhome. Have you ever heard of any EVs that can be towed 4 wheels down behind a motorhome? Or is there any company considering this? And I see Dave shaking his head.
I know nothing about that. Sorry.
I can tell you in the case of the Tesla, you can't do that. In fact, if you have a problem and they call a tow truck, it can only be a flatbed. You can't roll the car. You can't roll the car, tow it, if you will. It damages the motor / generator and so forth. So it can only be towed on a flatbed. That's, again, experience with Tesla.
Interesting sidelight to that. The inverse is, what can you tow with an electric vehicle? And there are a couple of travel trailer companies that are now introducing travel trailers that have their own EV batteries, not because the travel trailer is an EV, but because they realize that towing will reduce your range, but you can plug your electric car into the travel trailer and it will help to extend the range of your battery so you can still get normal range while towing their travel trailer. Worth exactly what you paid for it. Okay, we are past time.
We are past time, yeah. Go ahead, Gary.
I was going to say thank you all for your interest, and I hope that we don't have a downpour like we had last year, so that you all can come out next Thursday and take a look at some of these vehicles. I think we're going to have maybe a dozen of them that you can kick the tires and talk to either a dealer or an owner and find out what they're like.
Great. Thank you, Gary. Again, I just want to remind everybody on Tuesdays when we're going to have the charging class. So we started to get into some of those questions. You're going to get all those questions answered on the Tuesday session on charging, towing, battery efficiency, range anxiety, which is a reality. So I think it's important, if you're considering purchasing one of these vehicles, that would be a very beneficial class for you. And the showcase next Thursday. Thank you very much for coming today.